Imagine an execution so brutal it's almost surreal, being pounded to death in a giant stone mortar. As heavy iron pestles rise and fall, crushing your body, you look the tyrant responsible in the eye and mock him. This is the legendary death of Anaxarchus, a philosopher who, with his supposed last words, declared his spirit unconquerable. Pound the pouch of Anaxarchus. You do not pound Anaxarchus himself. So, how did a man of wisdom, a companion to Alexander the Great, find himself suffering one of the most horrific executions in history? The answer, the stories say, lies in a single, cutting insult that a vengeful ruler could never forgive. This isn't just a story about a gruesome death. It's a testament to the power of the mind against the brute force of tyranny. The story of a man who, in his final moments, set out to prove he was truly unbreakable. In the brilliant and chaotic world of ancient Greece, philosophy wasn't just an academic subject. It was a way of life, a lens for viewing a world of war, conquest, and volatile politics. Philosophers weren't just thinkers. They were advisors, critics, and sometimes companions to the most powerful men on earth. And among them was Anaxarchus of Abdera, a man who walked in the shadow of the greatest conqueror the world had ever known, Alexander the Great. Anaxarchus was a follower of the philosopher Democritus and held a skeptical view of the world. He believed that our perceptions of reality were as flimsy and unreliable as stage scenery. For him, true happiness, or eudaimonia, didn't come from wealth or power, but from a state of inner calm and indifference to the chaos outside. He was renowned for his ability to remain content no matter the circumstances. He followed Alexander's army across Asia, witnessing everything from the ridiculous luxury of the conqueror's court to the brutal reality of the battlefield. He was there, in the inner circle, a man whose job was to provide perspective. But perspective can be a dangerous thing, especially when you're talking to men who believe they're gods. To understand how Anaxarchus ended up being pounded to death, we have to go back to the heart of Alexander's court. Being a philosopher in Alexander the Great's court was like walking a razor's edge. Alexander was a man of huge intellect and even bigger contradictions. Tutored by Aristotle himself, he deeply respected Greek culture. But he also had a titanic ambition and a growing belief in his own divinity that could easily curdle into violent rage. This was the world Anaxarchus had to navigate with his student Pyrrho. Along with Pyrrho, who would later found the school of skepticism, Anaxarchus went with the Macedonian army on its world-changing campaign into Asia. Military conquest and philosophical inquiry marched side by side. But what was Anaxarchus actually doing there? Was he a teacher, a spiritual guide, or just a court flatterer? The ancient sources paint a complicated picture. Some, like the historian Plutarch, suggest Anaxarchus was a sycophant who encouraged Alexander's delusions of grandeur. One story tells of a debate where Anaxarchus argued that Alexander should be worshipped as a god. But that image clashes with other accounts that show a man of biting irony, unafraid to remind the world's most powerful man of his limits. In one famous story, after Alexander had started calling himself the son of Zeus Ammon, as doctors tended to a cut from battle, Anaxarchus reportedly leaned in and wryly remarked, "See the blood of a mortal, not ichor, such as flows from the veins of the immortal gods." Ichor was the mythical, golden blood of the gods. With one devastatingly simple line, Anaxarchus shattered the divine pretense. He wasn't looking at a god, he was looking at a bleeding man. This was his philosophy in action. Anaxarchus came from the school of Democritus, who believed the world was just atoms and empty space. This led him to a form of skepticism. He argued that our senses are unreliable and that reality is no more real than a painted stage set or a dream. If the world itself is an illusion, then what are titles like king or god? This mindset gave him a profound sense of detachment. He could enjoy the luxuries of court without being a slave to them. Plutarch says this calm spirit reminded even the great king of how fleeting worldly honors are. One story claims he told Alexander there were infinite worlds, which made the conqueror weep, realizing he hadn't even conquered one. It perfectly captures their dynamic. Alexander wanted to conquer the world, and Anaxarchus believed the world wasn't what it seemed. This philosophical armor would be his greatest weapon. He was going to need it. Because while his sharp tongue might have amused Alexander, it would make him a mortal enemy of a lesser man, whose pride was as vast as his cruelty. The year is 331 BC. The city of Tyre has fallen to Alexander's armies. To celebrate, Alexander throws a series of lavish banquets. The air is thick with roasted meat, wine, and power. Kings, generals, and philosophers are all there to pay tribute to the new master of the world. Among the guests is a powerful Cypriot ruler named Nicocreon, a key ally to Alexander. He's a man of high status, but high status often comes with a fragile ego. At the height of the party, Alexander turns to Anaxarchus and asks him what he thinks of the magnificent feast. It's a simple question, but for a man like Anaxarchus, it was a golden opportunity. He surveys the scene, the food, the wine, the fawning courtiers, and delivers his verdict. He says it's all splendid, but it's missing one thing. The feast would be truly perfect, he adds, if it included the head of a satrap, a provincial governor. The ancient accounts say that as he spoke, he looked directly at Nicocreon. The insult was breathtaking. He was suggesting that the decapitated head of a tyrant like Nicocreon would be the perfect centerpiece. The hall must have gone silent. All eyes would have darted from Anaxarchus to Nicocreon, waiting for the explosion. It was a public, unforgivable humiliation. But what could Nicocreon do? Reacting with anger would just prove Anaxarchus' point. Challenging him might displease Alexander, who seemed to enjoy the philosopher's wit. So, Nicocreon did nothing. He sat there, seething, his face a mask of cold fury. He swallowed the insult, but he never forgot it. Diogenes Laertius tells us that from that day on, Nicocreon harbored a deep hatred. The words had planted a seed of vengeance, a seed that would lie dormant for years, just waiting for the right moment to sprout. Anaxarchus may have moved on, but for a tyrant like Nicocreon, the score was far from settled. He was a patient man. He would wait. He knew that one day, the philosopher might be left unprotected. For years, Anaxarchus remained safe in Alexander's orbit. As long as the conqueror lived, he was untouchable. But the world Alexander built was held together by his will alone. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died in Babylon. He was just 32. His death sent a shockwave across the world. The vast empire, with no clear heir, began to fracture. His generals, the Diadochi, turned on each other in a bloody scramble for power. The age of unity was over. The age of warlords had begun. For the members of Alexander's inner circle, this was a time of extreme danger. Their closeness to the fallen king now made them targets. Anaxarchus, the philosopher who preached indifference to fortune, was now completely at its mercy. With his patron gone, he decided to leave. The details are sparse, but we know he set sail, maybe for home. But fate, or maybe just a storm, had other plans. His ship was forced off course, battered by winds. As the storm cleared, the bitter irony of his situation must have hit him hard. Of all the coastlines in the Mediterranean, his ship had brought him to Cyprus. And not just anywhere in Cyprus. He had landed in the territory of his mortal enemy, King Nicocreon. For years, Nicocreon had nursed his grudge. He had replayed that banquet scene in his mind 1,000 times. The philosopher's mocking gaze, the insult, his own burning humiliation. He must have thought revenge was impossible. And now, sheer chance had delivered his enemy right into his hands. Word of the philosopher's arrival shot to the palace. You can only imagine the tyrant's cruel delight. The man who had humiliated him was now a powerless castaway. The shield of Alexander the Great was buried in Babylon. There was no one left to protect Anaxarchus. Nicocreon gave the order, "Seize him." The philosopher was arrested and dragged before the very tyrant he had insulted all those years ago. The stage was set for the final act. Anaxarchus, the man who believed reality was an illusion, was about to face the most reality imaginable. For Nicocreon, this wasn't just about punishment. It was about annihilation. He wanted a death so horrific it would erase the memory of his own humiliation. He decreed a sentence of almost unheard-of barbarity. Anaxarchus was to be put in a large stone mortar and pounded to death with iron pestles. This was a slow, bone-shattering execution designed for maximum agony and degradation. As the guards dragged Anaxarchus to the mortar, Nicocreon must have watched. He expected to see terror, to hear pleas for mercy. He was about to be deeply disappointed. This was the moment Anaxarchus' entire philosophy had prepared him for. He taught that the physical world, the sensations of the body, were unreal and meaningless. The true self, the mind, was separate from the bag of flesh it lived in. Pain was just another fleeting sensation, unable to touch his core. As he stood before the mortar, he was a philosopher about to give his final lecture. The guards forced him into the stone basin. The pestles were raised. As the brutal pounding began, breaking his bones, he looked directly at Nicocreon. He uttered the immortal words, "Pound, pound the pouch of Anaxarchus. You do not pound Anaxarchus himself." It was a thunderclap of defiance. Nicocreon could destroy his body, the pouch, the container, but he couldn't touch his mind, his true self. He was asserting the ultimate freedom of the mind. Every sickening crunch of bone was a testament not to Nicocreon's power, but to his impotence. He could cause pain, but he couldn't inspire fear. Enraged by this composure, Nicocreon threatened to cut out his tongue to silence him. What happened next is one of history's most stunning acts of defiance. Anaxarchus bit down hard, severed his own tongue, and spat it in the tyrant's face. He had silenced himself on his own terms. His final message was clear. After that, there was nothing left to say. Ancient writers say he endured the rest of the torture with unwavering fortitude until the very end. The tyrant had killed the philosopher, but the philosopher had clearly won. Whether the story of Anaxarchus' death is literal history or a powerful legend, its impact was immense. The tale of his incredible fortitude spread throughout the Hellenistic world, passed down by historians and philosophers like Diogenes Laertius and Cicero. His execution became a legendary example of philosophical courage. In his death, Anaxarchus provided the ultimate proof for his life's teachings. By facing a torturous end with scorn and indifference, he demonstrated his core principle in the most extreme way possible. He became the embodiment of apatheia. His last words, "Pound the pouch of Anaxarchus," became a rallying cry for the idea that the mind is a fortress that no violence can breach. His example of endurance resonated powerfully with the later Stoics, whose ethics centered on remaining untroubled by fortune. He had provided a real-world, flesh-and-blood example of their highest ideal. The story poses a profound question. Can a person truly be unbreakable? What gives someone the strength to face such horror not just with acceptance, but with mockery? For Anaxarchus, the answer was in his philosophy. By genuinely believing the physical world was a kind of illusion, he was able to detach from it. He saw his own destruction as something happening to his body, but not to him. His legacy is a complex one. He was the philosopher who might have flattered a king, but would never bow to a tyrant. His story is a stark reminder of the eternal clash between intellect and brute force. Nicocreon is remembered by history for one reason. He was the man who killed Anaxarchus. In his desperate attempt to erase an insult, he ended up immortalizing the man who delivered it. The story of Anaxarchus is a brutal journey into the past, but its message is timeless. It's about a man who used his philosophy as both a shield and a weapon. He showed that true freedom isn't the absence of chains, but the state of mind that makes them irrelevant. While Nicocreon could command armies and order executions, he was a slave to his ego. Anaxarchus, even as he was being pounded into oblivion, was completely and utterly free. His life and death challenge us to think about where our own resilience comes from. Where do we draw the line between what can and cannot be taken from us? Anaxarchus drew that line between the body and the mind, the pouch and the self. And in doing so, he left behind more than just a gruesome historical anecdote. He left a testament to human dignity in the face of unspeakable violence. He proved that while a tyrant can shatter a man's bones, he can never crush his spirit. If you found this story of philosophical courage compelling, be sure to subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more dives into the dramatic lives and ideas that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what you think about Anaxarchus' ultimate act of defiance. Could you ever imagine having that kind of fortitude? Thanks for watching.